My brother-in-law came out and told my wife he was in love with her. I never expected a single confession to rip my entire family apart. From the outside, our lives seemed perfect. My sister had married a man everyone loved, my wife and I were happy, and we all spent time together like any close-knit family would. There were no signs, at least not any I had noticed, of the chaos that was waiting beneath the surface. It all began one lazy Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, watching TV, while my wife, Sarah, scrolled through her phone. We were enjoying a rare quiet moment. That's when I noticed her expression change. Her face paled, and her body went rigid as if she'd just read something truly horrifying. I paused the show. "What's wrong?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat frozen for a few moments, staring at her phone screen. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "It's Ben. Ben is my brother-in-law, married to my sister Emily. We've all been close for years, and there was nothing unusual about Ben texting Sarah. They were friends, the four of us often spent time together as couples. But I could tell from her reaction that this was no ordinary message." "What did he say?" I pressed, suddenly feeling a tightness in my chest. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide and filled with a mixture of shock and fear. "He just told me he's in love with me." My mind blanked for a moment. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "In love with you?" I echoed, as if saying it out loud would help me understand. "Ben's married to Emily. What the hell is he talking about?" "I don't know," Sarah whispered, still in shock. She handed me her phone, and there it was, a long message from Ben, pouring out his feelings for her. He said he'd been in love with her for years, that he couldn't keep it hidden any longer, and that it was tearing him apart. My blood boiled. How could Ben do this? How could he betray my sister like that? And why would he put my wife in such an uncomfortable position? My first instinct was to call him and confront him right then and there, but Sarah stopped me. "Let me handle it," she said, her voice steadying. "I need to make it clear to him that this is never going to happen." I agreed, though reluctantly. Part of me wanted to explode, but Sarah was right, it was better for her to shut this down before it escalated any further. She quickly typed out a response, firmly telling Ben that what he was feeling was inappropriate, that she loved me, and that there was no chance of anything ever happening between them. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought that Ben would realize the absurdity of his confession, apologize, and things would go back to normal. But it didn't end there. The next morning, Ben showed up at our house unannounced. He looked like a mess, disheveled, bags under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. He begged to speak with Sarah alone, but I refused to let that happen. We all sat down in the living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "I just need to explain myself," Ben said, his voice shaky. "I'm sorry for what I said, but I couldn't keep it in anymore. My marriage to Emily. It's not what you think." "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my anger in check. Ben ran his hands through his hair, clearly agitated. "I've been unhappy for a long time. Emily and we don't connect the way we used to. I feel like we're just going through the motions. And Sarah's always been there, always been kind to me. I didn't mean for this to happen, but I fell for her." "Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "You've been married to my sister for 5 years. She loves you. And now you're sitting here telling me you're in love with my wife? Do you even hear yourself?" Sarah interjected before I could say more. "Ben, you need to stop. This isn't about me. You need to work on your marriage with Emily, or you need to walk away. But you can't drag me into this. I'm not interested in you like that. I love my husband." Her words seemed to hit him like a brick wall. Ben slumped forward, his head in his hands. I know this is all wrong. I just don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to fix things with Emily." I wanted to throw him out of the house, to tell him never to come back. But something about the way he looked, so broken, so lost, stopped me. I hated him in that moment for what he'd done, but I could also see that he was struggling with something much deeper than a misguided crush on my wife. After a long, tense silence, Ben stood up. "I should go," he mumbled. "I'm sorry. I never should have said anything." He left without another word, leaving Sarah and me in stunned silence. The following days were tense. Sarah and I agreed that we needed to tell Emily what had happened. It wasn't right to keep something like this from her, but we also didn't want to destroy her life without knowing the full story. We decided to sit on it for a day or two, hoping Ben would come to his senses and confess on his own. He didn't. Eventually, Sarah and I couldn't keep it to ourselves any longer. We invited Emily over, and after a few minutes of awkward small talk, we sat her down and told her everything, Ben's confession, his visit to our house, and his admission that he'd been unhappy in their marriage. Emily's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't cry or get angry. Instead, she sat there quietly, absorbing everything we were telling her. "I knew something was wrong," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it was this, but I knew." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked gently. Emily sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "Ben's been distant for a long time. He's barely home, and when he is, he's distracted. He's stopped talking to me about anything important. I've been trying to reach him, but it's like he's built this wall around himself. I didn't want to admit it, but I think I've known for a while that he wasn't happy." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, trying to process what I was hearing. "I don't know," Emily said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I guess I was afraid. Afraid of what I'd find out if I pushed too hard. And now I don't know what to do." We sat with Emily for hours that night, trying to console her, offering support. She didn't want to confront Ben just yet. She needed time to process everything. We promised her that we'd be there for whatever she decided to do next, and eventually, she left, looking more broken than I'd ever seen her. The days that followed were a blur. Ben stopped showing up to family gatherings, and Emily became more withdrawn. I could feel the strain it was putting on Sarah and me, too. We'd been dragged into this mess unwillingly, and it felt like our entire family was slowly disintegrating before our eyes. Then, one night, Emily called me. Her voice was shaky, and I could tell something was wrong. "I need to talk to you," she said. "There's more going on with Ben than I thought." I told her to come over immediately. When she arrived, she looked even worse than the last time I saw her. She sat down at our kitchen table and, after taking a deep breath, started to explain what she had discovered. A few days after our conversation, Emily had gone through Ben's phone. She had been hesitant to invade his privacy, but she felt like she needed answers. What she found shocked her to the core. "I found messages between Ben and another woman," Emily said, her voice trembling. "He's been seeing her for over a year." Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. I felt a surge of rage rise inside me. "He's been cheating on you?" Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Not just with one woman, either. There were messages from several. And that's not even the worst part." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling my stomach churn. Emily wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "I found out that Ben has a child with one of them. He's been paying her child support behind my back for years." It felt like the ground had just disappeared beneath me. Ben had a secret child? He had been living this double life the entire time he was married to my sister? I confronted him, Emily continued. At first, he tried to deny it, but when I showed him the messages, he admitted everything. He said the child was from before we got married, but he never told me. He's been sending money to the mother in secret, hiding it from me. The anger I felt toward Ben before was nothing compared to what I felt now. He hadn't just betrayed Emily with his feelings for Sarah, he had lied to her for their entire marriage, hiding a child, cheating on her with multiple women, and pretending everything was fine. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. Emily sat at our kitchen table, her face pale, eyes hollow from exhaustion and heartbreak. The weight of what she had just told us hung in the air, suffocating and impossible to ignore. Ben had not only betrayed her emotionally but also shattered the very foundation of their life together. There were no words for how I felt: anger, disgust, sadness. But nothing compared to the devastation Emily was going through. "I don't know what to do," Emily admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I feel like I've been living a lie. For years, I thought we had a normal marriage. But now I realize Ben was hiding so much from me. I just don't understand how it got to this point." I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone whose world has just been torn apart by a series of betrayals so deep they can hardly comprehend them? My instinct was to tell her to leave him, to get out while she could, but I also knew it wasn't that simple. "Emily, you don't have to make any decisions right now," Sarah said softly, reaching out to hold her hand. "You've just found all this out. Take your time. We're here for you, no matter what you decide." Emily nodded, her tears falling silently. "I know I need to leave him. I can't stay with someone who's lied to me like this. But it's so hard. I don't even know who he is anymore." In the days that followed, Emily made the difficult decision to confront Ben again, this time with a plan. She told him she wanted a divorce. She couldn't trust him anymore, and she refused to stay in a marriage built on lies. Ben didn't take it well. He begged, pleaded, and even tried to manipulate her into staying, claiming he could change, that he loved her. But Emily stood firm. She knew that the man she had married had disappeared long ago, and there was no salvaging what had been broken. The divorce proceedings began, and it quickly became clear just how deep Ben's deception ran. Emily discovered that he had been siphoning money from their joint accounts to pay for not only the secret child support but also for lavish gifts and vacations with the other women he had been seeing. He had been living a completely separate life outside their marriage, one filled with affairs, lies, and selfish indulgence. The legal battle was brutal. Ben fought her on everything: child support for their own children, the division of assets, even the house. But Emily, with the support of Sarah, me, and her close friends, pushed through. She hired a strong attorney and made sure that Ben's deceit was fully documented in court. In the end, she got full custody of their children, the house, and a decent financial settlement. Ben's other life was exposed for all to see, and he became a pariah, both in our family and in the community. For months after, Emily struggled to rebuild her life. The emotional scars ran deep, and trusting anyone again seemed impossible. She confided in Sarah one night that she had begun seeing a therapist, trying to work through the trauma of being lied to for so long. Slowly, she started to find herself again. She threw herself into her work, spent time with her kids, and reconnected with friends she had drifted away from during her marriage to Ben. As for me and Sarah, the whole ordeal tested our marriage too. Even though Sarah had done nothing wrong, I couldn't help but feel a deep unease about the fact that Ben had been in love with her. We had several long, difficult conversations about trust, about what had happened, and about how to move forward. Sarah was incredibly patient with me, understanding my need for reassurance, but also firm in her conviction that she had never and would never betray me. In the end, we came out stronger for it. We realized that what Ben had done had nothing to do with us and everything to do with his own brokenness. But even after Ben was out of our lives, the damage he caused lingered. Family gatherings became awkward. Our once close-knit group was now fractured. Some relatives sided with Ben, claiming Emily had driven him away by being too focused on work, not paying enough attention to his needs. Others, like us, saw the situation for what it was: Ben's selfishness and deceit had destroyed his marriage, not Emily's actions. One particularly heated Thanksgiving, Ben showed up uninvited to my parents' house. I hadn't seen him in months and had no interest in speaking to him, but there he was, acting as if nothing had happened. When Emily arrived with the kids, the tension in the room skyrocketed. Ben tried to engage her in conversation, but she ignored him, focusing solely on her children and the rest of the family. Eventually, Ben pulled me aside, clearly agitated. "I just don't get it, man," he said, his voice a mix of frustration and disbelief. "I made a mistake. But she won't even give me a chance to explain. It's like I'm the villain in this whole thing." "You are the villain," I replied coldly. "You lied to her for years. You cheated on her. You hid a child from her. What did you expect, Ben? That she'd forgive you, and you'd go back to playing happy families?" He scoffed, shaking his head. "It wasn't that simple. Our marriage was falling apart long before that. I just didn't know how to fix it." "Then you should have talked to her, not gone behind her back with multiple women. You destroyed your family, Ben. No one else did that. You." He opened his mouth to argue but then stopped, his expression hardening. Without another word, he walked away, leaving me standing there, my blood boiling. It was the last time I saw Ben. Emily eventually finalized the divorce, and while it was a long, grueling process, she emerged from it stronger. She took time to heal, both for herself and her children. It wasn't easy, but with therapy and the support of friends and family, she began to rebuild. She found a new sense of purpose and freedom, one that had been stifled during her marriage. As for Ben, he moved out of state a few months after the divorce was finalized. He made some attempts to stay in touch with his kids, but the relationship was strained, to say the least. Emily never kept them from him, but as they grew older, they began to see for themselves the man he truly was. The fallout from Ben's confession to Sarah, his lies, his affairs, and his secret child, left a permanent mark on our family. Holidays and family gatherings were never the same, and the innocence we once had as a close-knit group was gone forever. But in time, we learned to live with the scars. Emily, despite everything, eventually found happiness again. She met someone new, a kind and caring man who treated her with the respect and love she deserved. They took things slow, and after a few years, they married in a small, intimate ceremony with only close friends and family. This time, it felt different. There was no sense of pretense, no hidden darkness lurking beneath the surface. As for me and Sarah, we continued to grow stronger in our marriage. Ben's actions had shaken us, but they also reminded us of how important trust and communication were. We became more open with each other, more mindful of the little things that often go unnoticed in the busyness of life. In the end, Ben's betrayal wasn't just a story of a man who ruined his marriage, it was a story of resilience. Of how, even in the face of lies, heartbreak, and betrayal, we can find a way to rebuild. The wounds never fully heal, but they become part of the fabric of who we are, making us stronger, more compassionate, and, ultimately, more grateful for the people who stand by us through the worst of times. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed these Reddit stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.